Without further ado, I like to start on time and I want to respect all of your time. So thank you so much for being here today. Tonight, we're going to be running a Model UN panel on what's happening with Model UN conferences this year in the era of COVID-19. And we have an incredible set of panelists assembled today to talk about their conferences and what we're seeing as trends in the Model UN community to help student leaders and advisors make some decisions and plan for this school year. But before we get started, I wanted to say again, if you haven't introduced yourself, please feel free to do so in the chat. Share with us where you're from, if you're an MUN advisor or student leader, and if you're currently teaching or attending school in person, online, or a hybrid. This is just great so we can get a sense of who's here today and how we can help answer all of your questions. I know that we are very much into this pandemic, and likely a lot of you have spent a lot of time online in Zoom meetings, but I want to briefly go over the Zoom etiquette that we'd like to have for our meeting today, just to make it a great experience for everyone. If you don't mind, please keep yourself on mute all throughout this panel. It will make it best for everyone to be able to hear and have a great experience. And if you're not one of our panelists, please also turn off your video. This way everybody can focus on our MUN experts who are going to be sharing their expertise throughout the call. And many of you submitted questions in advance, and we'll be covering a lot of those throughout this panel. And if you have any questions that you think of and you want us to answer, please feel free to type them into the chat. And Kana, one of our managers at Best Delegate, will be responding to questions in the chat, and we'll also be answering many of those at the end of our call as well. So without further ado, I want to introduce myself and then turn the show over to our amazing panelists so you can learn a little bit about all of them. Briefly, I'm Laura Beth Goldsmith. I'm the Executive Director of Partnerships at Best Delegate, and I'm going to be serving as your moderator this evening. I have over 15 years of Model UN experience and love doing MUN. I've taught Model UN to thousands of students and educators all over the world. And I love MUN because I can see the impact it has on students and how it transforms them. Personally, teaching MUN is a huge passion of mine, and at Best Delegate, I have the job of getting to work with families, schools, school districts, governments, and even the United Nations to set up partnerships for students to be able to be empowered through Model UN. But enough about me. I want to turn the show over to our amazing panelists who are going to be sharing with you their Model UN expertise. And before I do that, I just want to tell you what are they going to be talking about this evening so you know what to expect. First, you're going to get the chance to get to know our awesome set of panelists who are experts in their own right, running Model UN organizations and conferences that many of you have participated in before. Then we're going to really get a preview of these conferences and see what to expect this year in the Model UN community. You're going to get a chance to learn how Model UN conferences are going to look and feel this year. For students and for educators, we have a conference database which is out with all of the conferences that are happening this school year. We have a number of individuals here today with a variety of MUN background. We have the Secretary General of NAIMUN, Alexander Chen. We have the Secretary General of FORMUNC, Rebecca Pfeiffer. We have the Secretary General of SUNS, Alex Horbal. We have the Secretary General of BMUN, Ashwin, Srikanth. And we have awesome organizers of Model UN programs as well. We have Felix Chen, the CEO of Best Delegate, who also organizes the Virtual MUN conferences. We have Chris Talamo, the Executive Director of IMUNA, who hosts NHSMUN and other programs as well. And we have John Remmel, who is the Faculty Advisor for Santa Margarita Catholic High School and the host of SOCOMUN. And they just had their conference, so he'll be able to share experiences about that conference as well. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our panelists and let them share a little bit more about themselves. They're going to each keep it to under a minute and share with us a bit about their MUN background, how many years they've been doing MUN, what Model UN program they run, the size of their conference, and also one word to explain how they're feeling about Model UN this coming school year. And just as a reminder before we do that, if you're one of our panelists, please keep your camera on. And if you are not one of our panelists, if you don't mind, please just turn your camera off so everyone can focus on our awesome MUN expert panelists. And let's go ahead and get started. And Chris, would you mind introducing yourself first, please?
Not at all. I'd be happy to, although I'm going to have to try to keep in my head all the different points that I got to hit within 60 seconds. Like this is one of those time trials or something. But yeah, I'm Chris Talamo. I've been doing ModUN for, oh wow, since 2003. So that's way too many years to say out loud. But my first conference that I went to was actually Remmel's conference, SOCOMUN, where I received an award recognizing my very awkward speeches, and that literally changed my life forever. So I owe everything to them really at the end of the day. But these days I'm running the NHSMUN conference, which usually takes place in New York City at the Hilton, and we've been very, very lucky to be able to operate partly out of the United Nations for the past many years. We're very, very fortunate that we're able to bring together like students from over 70 different countries to really come together and just have this fascinating debate. But more importantly, I think a lot of what we do also is supporting other ModUN programs and conferences all over the world too. And I've supported, 50-person conferences where it's 2 schools meeting on a weekend to big global affairs. So I'm excited to hopefully chime in on many, many different things.
Thank you very much, Chris. John Remmel, would you please introduce yourself and your conference that Chris attended all those years ago?
Chris and Ryan as well. But hello, my name is John Remmel. I'm the director of Santa Margarita Catholic High School's Model United Nations. I run the SOCOMUN conference. It was our 29th conference this year, our first one online. Thank you for having me here today. I appreciate it. We were able to host over 1,000 students online. We had all of our students that were running the conference on campus, so we're able to support them, and they were in all their committee rooms by themselves, 3 kids in a room, running the conference. So we were able to go around and have our IT there. We actually had a burger truck come onto campus and make burgers for everybody. We had the fire department come out because they saw the smoke from the burger truck of a campus that was supposed to be closed. And so we had the entire Orange County Fire Department and police officers who got a free burger for showing up to our conference. So I'm a little scared about what's going on this year, but I'm kind of relieved. So scared or relieved, I can't pick which one. I was a little bit scared until I ran my conference, and now that my conference is over, I'm relieved because all the rest of you have to run your conferences. So we'll see how that works out. We're actually going to our second conference this weekend at the Cerritos Novice Conference. So we'll see how that works out. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, John. Next, we'll hear from Alex Chen, the Secretary General of NAIMUN.
Hey everyone, it's great to be with you all. Thanks for hosting us and all of this. So yeah, I'm the Secretary General of NAIMUN, the North American Invitational Model United Nations, which is Georgetown's premier high school ModUN conference. This will be our 58th year running it, and definitely, I think, one of the most interesting years running it, for sure. I've been doing ModUN since, I guess, the end of middle school, so that's been now like 8 years-ish. This is my second year on the Secretariat running and organizing the conference. We usually host around 3,000 delegates and advisors with 270 plus staffers at the Washington Hilton in DC. And yeah, I'm super excited to see what this year ends up being and learning a bit more about all of you all and answering all of your questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. Next, we'll hear from Alex Horbal from SUNS.
Thanks, Laura Beth. Yeah, my name is Alex Horbal. I'm a 4th-year student at McGill University in Montreal. I've been doing ModUN for about 7 years now, and my current position, as introduced, I'm the Secretary General of the Secondary Schools United Nations Symposium, as we call SUNS. We usually have around 1,000 delegates and 250 staff hosted at the Sheraton in Montreal. This year we are going online. We'll be hosting that conference around almost the exact same time as we would our in-person conference, which is November 13th to 15th. And then to sum up how I'm feeling about MUN this year, I'm very curious to see how this all goes.
Aren't we all? Thank you, Alex. And next we'll hear from Ashwin, the Secretary General of BMUN.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be speaking with you all today. My name is Ashwin Srikanth. I'm currently a 4th year at the University of California, Berkeley. I've done MUN for 10 years now, and it's really become, I think, one of the most empowering and amazing experiences of my schooling life, but also it's just been a highlight of my time at Cal as well. So this year I have the honor of being the Secretary General for Berkeley Model United Nations 69th session. So I'm incredibly happy and excited to take on that role. So as one of the oldest Model UN conferences in the world, BMUN draws nearly 2,000 delegates from around the world to the Berkeley campus every year. This year, we are moving online, but also due to sort of like the interest expressed and demand for seats at the conference, we really expect similar numbers despite the uncertain situation that many of us are placed in. So conference is actually going to be taking place from February 26th through 28th. Yeah, and I think if there's one word that really describes how I'm feeling about MUN this year, it'd have to be hopeful. I think with so much going on in the world, Model UN really presents an important forum for us to unify and kind of envision a future without a lot of the challenges that plague us. And I think more than the philosophical goals of MUN, you know, online and hybrid situations really give us a chance to kind of explore new options and possibilities for debate and discourse in ways that we really hadn't considered before, which I think is just incredibly exciting.
I totally agree, Ashwin. I'm feeling very hopeful and also optimistic about the way students are going to get to learn and participate in MUN this year. And last but not least, we have Kevin Felix Chen, the CEO of Best Delegate. Kevin, would you mind introducing yourself?
Oh, Laura Beth, I think you have Rebecca as well, but I'll go.
I'm so sorry, Rebecca. Please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rebecca Pfeiffer, and I'm the Secretary General of Fordham's Model United Nations Conference called FORMUNC. This is going to be our 4th iteration. We had to postpone last year, so I'm very excited to be leading it this time and trying to get as creative possible with all of our virtual opportunities. I only began doing MUN in college. I never competed in high school because we had so few and no virtual resources from my team then. And so it's been so exciting to develop all of our strategies going into this year. Normally we are quite a small local conference as it's beginning. Our largest attendance has been 150, but I'm hoping that we'll be able to expand a lot more given the virtual reach this year.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rebecca. And now Kevin.
All right, hey everyone, my name is Kevin Felix Chen, so that makes my initials KFC, and I'm one of the co-founders of Best Delegate Model United Nations, or one of the world's leading resources in Model UN. I've personally done Model UN for about 2 decades now, started in high school in Southern California, in the MUN club, so I didn't get to go to SOCOMUN because my school couldn't get it ready in time. Did Model UN there, did Model UN at UCLA, served as Secretary General and head delegate there, and then served as Secretary General of a conference at the UN headquarters where I fortunately got to introduce Ban Ki-moon as a keynote speaker that year, and then eventually worked in corporate and decided to quit my job and start Best Delegate so I can give back my Model UN experience. Best Delegate, before COVID, we did all in-person programs. So that was a summer Model UN Institute. It was helping with conferences, workshops, and we also did Advisors Institute, so advisor training. Since COVID, everything has been pivoted online. So we've been running virtual Model UNs, virtual Model UN Institutes. We've worked with over 3,000 students online since COVID. And I think the word I would use is inspired, because I think this year, more than ever, Model UN is like the solution to showing students you can still be engaged with learning online. And this is the year where we want to learn about world issues and current events that are literally happening right now, and build our public speaking skills, and be able to even make new friends that we otherwise couldn't have if we weren't online. So I'm feeling pretty inspired. Also, just shout out to this whole panel. I think like I've been to all the conferences here except for FORMUNC, and I've worked with Rebecca before. So I love everyone that's on the panel. So thank you for being here.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And you talked about being inspired. I also am inspired not just by our amazing panelists that are running conferences, but by how the whole MUN community has stepped up and really led on what online learning can look like and on how to provide engaging experiences for students during a global pandemic. And just a teeny bit of context for you guys before we jump in, we were assembling the conference database, which I'll preview for all of you at the end of this call. And we found out some awesome things about how the Model UN community has been handling the pandemic. And so far, 72% of conferences that are confirmed for the fall are going to be virtual conferences. So there's a mix of in-person and online conferences happening this year around the world. And we also found out that so far, about 50%, 48% of North American high school conferences have confirmed dates. And so far, out of the MUN conferences that exist, only 7% of conferences have been canceled for this school year. So we see a lot of programs that are innovating, going online, and working on providing a really great experience for all of their students. So I want to jump right in and get some questions answered for all of you. Thank you so much for submitting questions in advance. If you have any additional questions that come up, please feel free to go ahead and add them in the chat as well. But the first question that I want to really get addressed is what format are conferences using this year? Are they going to be in person? Are they going to be online? Are they going to be a hybrid? And if it's online, what platforms are you planning to use? And what does that really look like? So first, just a show of hands, since our panelists are all visually shown here, raise your hand, panelists, if you're going to be doing an in-person conference this year. Okay, so we have some that are planning in person, and I think Chris and John, we had hands as well, because we also are seeing some hybrid options that might be happening this year. And for those of you that are planning virtual conferences, let's see a show of hands for that as well. All right, so I want to get some descriptions of what these different conferences look like, so everyone here can get a sense of that. And I'd love to actually start off with John Remmel, since you just had your conference. Would you mind painting a little bit of a picture for everyone of what the conference looked like this year and what that experience was like for students that participated?
Well, I'd start off with saying I did not use the road that most other people have been using, and I did not use Zoom. We're a Microsoft Showcase school, and our ed tech person said that he would be happy to help me roll out Microsoft Teams to use. So they created 33 teams for me with 1,200 Santa Margarita accounts that they created, and we distributed those to the attendees. We crashed our school's Teams database and kicked all of our regular students out of their team the week before the conference. I don't know why that happened, but all our students got booted out of the teams and had to get added back in. And then we sent out all the information to the attending schools and had them log in. I really wish that we had done that, if we'd been able to do that about a week earlier, because then we would have been able to use the Teams format asynchronously to start off our conference and develop some more stuff with the students that way. We weren't able to do that, and that's one of the problems with our conference early on, is that we're getting our school rolling with the year. Ed Tech was doing all these other things. They were doing all the creation of the accounts outside of everything else they're doing with our school. And then when they crashed the school's Microsoft account, I couldn't really complain about anything. So I think that the thing that I liked about what we did is that we had all of our students running the conference on our campus. So it was only about 100 students, and like I said, they're in 33 different rooms, 3 kids to a room, plenty of room for social distancing. They weren't happy because I made them all wear masks, because that's California's standard right now, that if you're on campus, you need to have a mask on, even if it's 3 people in a room. So I hope I answered your question. I think it turned out fine at the end. I really wish I would have had another couple of weeks, but that's kind of the drawback of being the first conference up, and also with trying something new using Microsoft Teams.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, John, for sharing about your experience. Kevin, would you also mind sharing? I know Best Delegate has been running programs since COVID started. Could you tell us what another online experience might look like for people?
Yeah, we've been running virtual Model UN conferences since March, and we are running those every month this year. These are all one-day conferences. Some of them are training conferences for beginners, and some of them are invitationals, which are more for experienced delegates who want to practice before they go out to a multi-day conference. So in the one-day conference format, it's basically a 6-hour experience, like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., for example. And we use Zoom, which has been quite stable for debate. The only drawback back during the spring and the summer was that the breakout rooms, the students couldn't select on their own, but Zoom has since updated that feature, and now students can select their own breakout room. So we looked at a lot of platforms. Zoom worked for us. And so we have all these one-day conferences, which is actually modeled after Southern California, where they have a lot of one-day conferences, makes it very accessible for students to try MUN for the first time. These committees, we made them all small. So we have like 20 to 30 students per committee. and it's just a very inviting experience. Since the fall, we've also included Google Classrooms before you go into Zoom, so that way students can start collaborating beforehand. And then in practice on Zoom, the students are using Google Documents to draft resolutions together. So it's a very more like a close-knit experience where every student gets to speak multiple times, and the students get to work together very closely in small teams.
Thank you, Kevin. I'd also love to hear from one of our conferences that are planning for this school year. So Alex from NAIMUN, would you mind sharing just a little bit more about what NAIMUN might look like this school year?
Sure, yeah, definitely. Right now, we're still hoping to be on in person, just because it's still 4 months away and we kind of don't know where everything will go. Obviously, it's getting tougher and tougher, but we've been taking it month by month over the summer and looking at different options. If we do end up being in person and DC restrictions, are lifted, what we're obviously going to be looking at are smaller committees, kind of like what Kevin said, is really to make it as engaging as possible for delegates. So having smaller committees, having more staff members per committee, whether it's making sure that we adjust layouts of different rooms, working with the Washington Hilton to make sure everything is socially distanced and as safe as possible. But in general, what it'll really be looking like is much more individual attention to delegates. We simply can't have those large 200 person committees. Double delegate committees might have to go away because we can't have that kind of interaction anymore. But whatever it ends up being will likely be much more interactive individually. And we've been considering online as an option if it does happen, likely using Zoom, looking at different alternatives of whether it be different supportive technology. So we've always used technology at NAIMUN a lot so far. So whether that's going paperless in GAs and EcoSocs with having people use Google Docs, so that'll be an easy transition, or even just having more people on Zoom working together in those smaller committees. So we're excited to see whatever happens, but it's definitely been a month-by-month reevaluation.
Thank you, Alex. I know a lot of people are in that same boat where they might be planning a conference and may normally happen in person and are considering that shift to online. A little bit later in this call, I'm going to preview for you. Best Delegate has recently put together a guide of how to do Model UN on Zoom. So for many of the advisors that are wanting to practice with their students and student leaders that want to test this, we'll be sharing a free guide with everyone, and conferences are welcome to use it as well to see how this year you can continue to do Model UN in an alternative format. But on that same theme, I'd love to also have Chris briefly share what is in store for NHSMUN this year in terms of what the conference is going to look like and what people might expect.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because at the moment, we're planning 2 conferences, one virtual and one in person, because a lot of our faculty advisors have given us very strong feedback on both sides of that aisle. And so obviously, to do an in-person conference, and this is similar to what Alex said, we'd need, the guidelines currently to change. And then if they do change, we'd be looking at definitely smaller committees and so on and so forth. But it's nice because, at least in my opinion, in a virtual conference, you also have to have smaller committees. So a lot of the things, planning for a social distance in-person conference ends up kind of looking not too dissimilar from a virtual conference. And if we can't do in person, then we're going to offer everybody the opportunity to join us for the virtual. But other than that, I mean, if you would ask me this question in March, I would have been very concerned about the ability to replicate the other parts of our conference, like committee speakers, like mission briefings and that kind of stuff. But Kevin pointed out that the breakout rooms, which for me at least is just night and day game changer, that pretty much sealed the deal for me for Zoom, and that was totally awesome. And I've been fortunate too that we've been able to get a friendly connection and the Zoom development team folks, and we're hey, can we have an API for registrations that each student gets an individual link, because Zoom bombers is also something that we're keenly concerned about. But no, I mean, I honestly, given enough time, I'm really hopeful that the virtual conference will have all the elements that an in-person conference will have. Delegates will just be on their couches and it'll be a little bit different layout, but they'll get hopefully the same value out of it at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And Chris touched on a question that we also got in the chat box, which is about how do you keep Zoom safe and make sure you don't have Zoom bombers infiltrating your committees and keeping everything secure. And one of the top things that we can recommend is having it be password protected so that people can't just randomly join the links. That makes a huge difference. And sending unique links out to each of your students in advance. This is also something we'll talk about in the Zoom guide, so feel free to check that out later on for additional information. Next, I'd love to address a question over to Alex, who's going to be running SUNS this year. And I think you have over 900 students signed up already for your online conference. And I want to, again, hear what that conference is going to look like. And specifically, if you can also tackle the question of how do we keep people engaged at an online conference and keep it interesting for students that are participating? We'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well.
All right, thanks, Laura Beth. So first, what is the conference going to look like this year? So when we made the decision to go online, essentially it was out of our hands. For an in-person conference, we require our 250 staff to be in Montreal. These are all volunteer McGill students. So when McGill made the decision back in May to have our classes online for fall, it ruled out an in-person conference. So we began then planning the online conference. And the best advice I got from a mentor of mine was, rather than trying to translate the exact conference experience to an online format, which I think we can all agree would be nearly impossible, is to look at what your mission statement is and try to work backwards from there. Achieve the same thing through a different means. So how are we doing that? What is the actual conference going to look like? Well, it's on Zoom. I won't get into the specifics of it right now, of exactly of how each committee is going to work, but how I can explain that is almost addressing the second question, is how do you keep delegates engaged? I think keeping them engaged in an online MUN committee session is a matter of adapting it. Again, not completely translating it in the normal sort of setting of in-person, but translating it to an online format, acknowledging the differences. One of the ways we're doing that is for our larger committees, our general assemblies, our ECOSOCs. These committees, we've decided to go with, it was not an easy decision to make, but go with pre-assigned committee blocks. So delegates are already assigned into a block prior to the committee. Prior to the committee beginning, and they know who they're in a block with. This is an odd choice because anyone who's participated in Model UN knows that it's a foundational part of any committee is forming the block. However, we see this more as just taking out a section of the experience while still retaining a very important part of it, which is the drafting of resolutions, the voting, the arguments. And by having them in the blocks, this erases one of the most difficult parts of, I think, hosting a Zoom committee, and that would be figuring out who you're going to work with. And then second, it keeps people engaged by they constantly have a team to communicate with. Even the delegates who are new to Model UN and who are less sure of themselves, maybe less confident, in this pre-assigned block, they know they have a team that has their back. So that's one of the ways. I could go on all day as we're getting closer, so we do really have a good picture of it, but I'm sure I'll get into that in some of the later questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next up, I'd like to let Rebecca chat a little bit more about what FORMUNC is going to look like this year. We have some smaller conferences and some larger conferences, and I think it's great to see what a smaller conference is also going to look like. And if you don't mind also sharing what is the experience level of students like at your conference, and how can conferences accommodate people of all different experiences?
Yeah, so at FORMUNC, we've always been trying to tailor our audience to an educational experience and starting out with newer delegates. And with this year, that's going to come with some actual introductory sessions led by committee chairs so that any delegates who have not participated in a conference, either virtually or outside of their own delegations, they will have some practice and some time to start to get to know other members of their committee. We do allow other experienced delegates though, and when we've been in person in the past, the goal has been to have these experienced delegates act as leaders and guides for these newer delegates. And so we will take time to pause, go through some more introductory parliamentary procedure if needed, but also try and include more discussion on sustainable development goals and incorporate some professors who are experienced in the topic area so that they can present as well and help guide students on their resolutions so that they're more realistic, practical, and students can get creative through the lens of a professional. So for this year, it's hopefully going to adapt somewhat easily by having, all of our committee sessions will be held through Zoom, and then we're planning to create multiple Discord channels so that students during breakouts and unmoderated caucuses will have more free time to speak to one another. And that's also going to come with, as we are entirely virtual, having some shorter debate sessions and then longer break time so that students can use that for more unmoderated discussion. And I believe I didn't mention earlier, but our conference is the same weekend as BMUN, so February 27th to 28th, but opposite coasts, even virtually, so hopefully not too much overlap there.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. And I think that also points out the fact that so many conferences are testing so many different new and innovative ways to keep delegates engaged. And from my experience working with students online, I've actually seen an uptick in engagement around note passing and feedback for one another with the real-time abilities to use chat and other features for students to be able to participate. So while I think there are some challenges with online, there are also a ton of benefits that students are getting to experience, and oftentimes it's more engaging in the moment to follow along with. Next up, I'd love to hear from Ashwin about what BMUN is planning for this year. And specifically, Ashwin, one of the questions we keep seeing is about unmods. What are these going to look like as well? If you don't mind touching upon that in your answer of the BMUN picture, that would be great.
Yeah, of course. So this year, BMUN is taking place in an online format, and really this looks to be the state of affairs unless there's some new update. And I think at the end of the day, we have to be able to guarantee the safety of our delegates, advisors, and secretariat. And I think, while it's unfortunate that we really won't be able to provide as much of an in-person touch, the online format, I think, as many people have said before, it really does present some incredible opportunities for innovation and expansion. And I think at the end of the day, I think we're more than confident that we'll still be able to provide, as good a delegate experience at BMUN this year as we have, for the last 68. So I think in that vein, obviously, BMUN will definitely look and feel a little bit different. So I think, beyond the fact that we're in an online forum, likely to be using Zoom, I think we plan on making both logistical and structural changes to the conference itself. So for example, debate, I think will have to be a little bit more structured to accommodate the relative flexibility of an online debate forum. So in larger committees containing over 200 people, we obviously need to account for stagnant debate, equitability of speaking and presentation, and a lot of other factors that will definitely affect the delegate experience. So I think this is probably a good time to also talk about unmods and how they're going to work a little bit. I think with the new Zoom update, that's definitely taken a huge load off our backs, but definitely we do need to focus a lot more on facilitating the conversations between delegates and making sure that people are able to have as much access to information and freedom of movement as possible. Because I think one of the best parts of unmods and sort of involving different parliamentary procedure and involving different people is that discourse itself. So I think when developing and innovating, any successful enterprise really needs to think about the why, right? The bottom line. So why is it that we do unmod? And I think that's because, at least at BMUN, that's to form your voting blocks, to form your resolution blocks, and to help write resolutions and to actually come up with those actionable solutions that people have discussed in their moderated caucuses and throughout debate. So at the end of the day, unmods are likely going to function as they did before, but I think the Zoom breakout room also gives us an opportunity to potentially even have more simultaneous unmods about different topics, because you can name breakout rooms and people will be able to move between varied conversations freely. So I think as long as those are regulated and as long as those are structured, we really are looking to provide delegates a lot more freedom than before. I think beyond debate itself, BMUN has really begun evolving as an institution that takes part in a lot of different spheres. And part of that comes from our international relations backgrounds, our primarily education focus, and our unique position at Berkeley. So we'll be developing policies in order to leverage all of these and really provide a more complete delegate experience, right? Not only for debate, but within the greater sort of Model UN ecosystem at large.
Thank you very much, Ashwin. I think a number of people touched on how it's going to be a little bit different and it's going to be innovative. And if I can make one recommendation, I know a lot of advisors here are also thinking about running smaller conferences at their own schools. test your technology and test it again. Zoom is great. All of these platforms have different pluses and minuses, but the most important thing is that all of your chairs are really comfortable and really familiar with it, so that they're able to facilitate a great online experience. Not just knowing what they needed to know before on how to run a committee, but really there's a lot of new things about running it well online that you want to make sure your staff is trained up for. Another key question we've gotten is, what is the role of a faculty advisor? Many of these conferences are happening in online rooms, and I want to get a better sense of what this might look like this year for advisors. So first, I'm going to address that question over to Kevin, and then after that, we're going to hear from John as well, who plays the dual role of being a faculty advisor and also helping to facilitate a conference. So first, Kevin, would you share a little bit about what you see as the role of faculty advisors this year?
Yeah, so I think one role that I think advisors have always done, but like what needs to be really important this year is actually play up the spirit and the cheerleading of the Model UN, because part of it is just showing students that this is possible. You can still do Model UN, and getting students to buy into it, into this experience. So I think like that is really important, and like showing students that like this is the most exciting thing that they can do after school right now is Model UN. So that part is there. I think the preparation is actually not that different. Like you still want to prepare students to have speeches, but in the online format, you can actually end up speaking more often, especially in smaller committees. So students actually have more chances to speak, which means you want to prepare more for moderated caucuses, which means you want to have more talking points instead of just your opening speech. And then on the writing side, because of the way breakout groups are done, students are not going to jump between breakout rooms as often. So there are actually a deeper focus on building resolution writing. And so from the advisor's perspective, it's about really challenging students to go deeper on their writing and their solutions and their operative clauses, and to help them prepare to research substantively as well. At the conference, you know, in the virtual format, it's very easy to provide feedback to your students and to actually watch their speeches, provide feedback to the students as well, if this, the conference allows you to jump in, which ours do. So I think that's also something that is easier to do than like in a traditional conference where advisors are running between committee rooms at a hotel or on a campus.
Thank you, Kevin. John, would you mind adding a little bit more to that from the experience of a faculty advisor and also a conference host?
Yes, we had all of our advisors were able to get into all 33 committees. They had the links to all those 33 committees. Even if they didn't have delegates in those committees, they could go into those committees. They had those links to be able to jump in and out. We even actually assigned some advisors a country in the committee because they wanted to see what was going on in the unmoderated caucus. And the only way to get into the channels in a team was actually to be part of the team. So we actually assigned them a country so they could go into the channels on the teams to see what's going on in the unmoderated caucus. We also hosted 2 faculty advisor meetings. We normally host 0 because most of our faculty advisors attend our conference all the time. I see them locally all the time. There's no need to have a special meeting. They have my cell phone number, they have my email. But this time around, because of the new world we're in, I wanted to get feedback not only on how we're doing, but what they thought of their conference was going to look like, and to have some interaction with that. I'd say another role you have as a faculty advisor is to really open up opportunities to your students. So one of the things we've done is with our program is we like to travel. I should be getting ready to go to the Royal Russell conference in London now. I'm not. But we have a lot of opportunities. Like we're going to go to the SUNS conference in Montreal virtually. We're going to BMUN again. We're going to BMUN. We're going to a conference in Panama. We're going to a conference in Seoul. Not really, but virtually. And so these are opportunities for our students to meet people from all around the world, even though they can't travel. It's a lot less expensive. So there's that. It's obviously not as much fun to just do the virtual conference and maybe do a virtual tour of Montreal, but it's what it is right now, and it's a great opportunity. And the Montreal conference, they have the Lord of the Rings committee, and they have a lot of really fun committees that we don't produce as high school conferences, and I think that are better off being hosted by college conferences, where the chairs are more adult and able to handle that a little bit more. So offering those options. And I'd say the most important thing that I'm stressing with my students right now is you have to help me learn what online MUN is. I can tell you all about in-person MUN. I've been doing it for 2.5 decades. I know up and down, backwards and forwards, all the things that are going on in an in-person conference. I know nothing about online MUN, or basically nothing. And you're the ones that are doing it. So after our conference, I said, what should we do to better prepare next time? And I plan on doing that all the time, is reviewing with them and asking them, what do we need to do to prepare for our conferences? How can I better teach you? How can I better teach other students how to prepare? What did you learn that you can share with us? So I think the learning is really important for advisors, and sharing with other advisors as well.
Thank you very much, John. I also just want to get a quick show of hands from our panelists. One of the top things advisors want to know is, will I be able to sit in on committees and see my students in action? Can I get a show of hands from most of our panelists? Will advisors be able to drop in and see committee sessions? Yeah. So at most of the conferences we've heard from this year, advisors will be registering in advance and will get a link, and they'll also be able to jump in and see committees. They won't be able to speak in the committee rooms at most conferences, neither can they at real conferences. We wanted to focus on the student experience, but you'll be able to see it, you'll be able to experience it, and you'll be able to communicate with your delegates after the conference as well about their experience there. So one of the things that John also touched on, which is a question that we got from a lot of advisors, is how can we prepare students for an online conference? What should we be doing differently, or how can we really make sure that our students are ready? So first, I'm going to turn that question over to Chris, and then I'm also going to touch on that from Alex as well, to hear really what should advisors and student leaders be doing to help get their students ready for conferences?
Yeah, and it's a really, really great question. And I mean, I'm going to caveat kind of my entire answer by saying that I think a lot of the specifics of the answer really depends on the environment that, you know, your school and that your program / class / club, whatever it may be, whatever your situation is. Because I've heard from a lot of folks, you know, very passionate Model UN teachers who, you know, because of school conditions and policy is like, they're like, I can't do anything with my kids this year. It's just not feasible and possible. But I know that some of them are like grouping up to do this on their own. And I just want to kind of pipe them some resources. So I think like, I don't think there's any one specific answer, but I think that the key most important things are that, one, I mean, most of the stuff that usually gets taught still has to be taught in some way, shape, or form, right? So like the students have to be getting the same experience, like giving speeches, and they have to be having the same experiences, thinking reactively and quickly on their feet for unmoderated caucuses too. I mean, the drills and the practice sessions and the trainings are just still the best way to do that. And I know that Best Delegate has a ton of resources. I know that we publish like delegate guides for beginner and advanced delegates too. And I think all that is still like really important, even when it's online. But I think what the added element is that, you know, I've talked to a lot of students too, and I think that a lot of them think that they are like Zoom experts now at this point because they've been going to Zoom classes for a while and they think they know the ins and outs. But you know, like you kind of have to be in Zoom in different settings and doing different things with it in order to really appreciate the different ways that you can interact or jump between breakout rooms or like really command a room. Because commanding a virtual room is very different than commanding an in-person room. So I think like part of the training, at least that I'm intending to do with some of our schools this year, is kind of like breaking down that assumption that like, okay, here are some of the things that you don't actually know that you should be thinking of. And then like building them up in terms of like, how can you then, you have a virtual speech, how can you use that to get the same level of like influence and command as if you were actually physically in the room and you could let your big booming voice do that for you or something. So mostly the same, still a little bit different though.
Thank you, Chris. We really appreciate that. And Alex, would you mind adding on? I know SUNS is right around the corner. Can you share a little bit about how people should be preparing?
For sure. So I'll outline sort of 3 specific things I think all delegates should be doing before attending SUNS, but I think this would go for really any conference. So the first is read the rules. This sounds very self-explanatory, but I was a delegate in high school once too, and I never read the rules in the delegate handbook. I relied on what was in practice. As everyone's elaborated so far tonight, the rules are different this year. So being prepared before you go in will certainly benefit you, and it will make for a smoother conference experience for everyone. The second point is take advantage of the special resources that, well, in SUNS's case, that SUNS is offering you. So as a delegate, you have 2 special resources you can access before the conference even starts. SUNS is offering a delegate roundtable a couple weeks before the conference. This is to invite, in a similar event to what we're doing right now, is just go through and explain how MUN is going to be different online and how is it going to be specifically different at SUNS. Second, we are hosting training workshops the Friday morning of the conference. That's the first day of SUNS this year. So before committees even start, you can attend all throughout Friday morning and afternoon. There are sessions in which our traveling team at McGill will host training sessions. These are super valuable. So take advantage of those special resources. And third, finally, another sort of self-explanatory one, but come in with an open attitude. MUN people, I can speak for myself, we come in with a lot of plans and expectations for how committee session and the whole weekend's going to go. And that won't change to a large degree, but at the same time, understand that it's a different medium. There's staffers on the other side of the Zoom meeting who are doing this for the first time as well. For the secretariat, like myself, we've never done this before. It's very new. So come in with an open attitude, be empathetic to the people who are running the conference and also your peers, the delegates who are going through the same thing. So that's what I would say is probably the best way to prepare for an online conference.
Thank you very much, Alex. So I totally agree. And the one other thing I'll add is practice. Just like any format you might be in, you have to practice in that format as well. I personally am getting my master's right now as well through Harvard, and I took an awesome advanced public speaking course this summer in an online format. And one of the top things we realized in this program is that there's a lot of unique elements to speaking via Zoom compared to speaking in person. And you really want to practice that with your delegates. You want to teach them how to have good lighting on their area, how to make sure their microphone sounds clear, how to optimize the way that they're speaking for this new format. So I definitely encourage you to practice online for your students as well if you're going to be attending an online conference, and utilize those awesome resources that different conferences are putting out and that Best Delegate is putting out as well to help your students prepare. Another question that we got is, what about the costs of conferences? Many of these are traditionally large-scale, in-person, multi-day conferences. What are the cost of conferences going to look like this year? And what can students and advisors expect there? And I'm going to address that over to Alex from NAIMUN, and then also to Rebecca, and then to Kevin on that question. So let's start off with Alex. Can you share a little bit with us about NAIMUN and what the cost is going to look like this year and how the conference might be changed in that way as well?
Sure, absolutely. So this year is definitely one of the weirder years that we've ever seen. And so we got a lot of feedback from advisors on kind of what their situation is, what their school situation is, and what their delegate situations is. The biggest thing we realized is we need to offer flexibility. And I'm sure like every Secretary General, everyone on this panel has realized that flexibility is key at this moment. So what we've done is extended a lot of our payment deadlines. So for people who had registered early, we've moved it to much later into November. For people who are registering now, the payment deadline isn't until December, and even so, we're offering refunds through December 31st. We've also promised that if we have to move online, we'll be offering full refunds for all of those fees. Because at the end of the day, this situation really isn't the fault of any of the students or the advisors. It really is just out of our control, and so we just want to provide the best experience possible for you all. So obviously, if we do have to go online, we'll definitely be looking at lowering the costs, lowering all the fees. You won't have to worry about those hotel fees, which can definitely be one of the trickier situations for advisors. But definitely it's been flexibility, and we've tried to be as accommodating as possible and update our website as frequently as possible. So we've added a COVID FAQs page that indicates all of our changes and policies. And by registering, you'll get frequent monthly updates on what has changed on policies and how we can be as accommodating as possible. And of course, we're still offering NAIMUN Aid, which is our financial aid program, so that if, for example, paying for conference fees is just not possible for delegates or advisors this year, you can apply for that NAIMUN Aid that we always offer and are proud to offer as support for whatever you may need this year.
Thank you very much, Alex. Rebecca, would you mind sharing a little bit about the cost of your conference, for example, so advisors can get a sense of some of what might be out there this year?
Sure. So typically our conference in the past with early registration, it's been $60. It can gradually increase from there depending on the size of the delegation shift. But this year we are hoping to decrease by a portion once our registration officially opens, as it normally is within a month from now that we would open our registration. We're hoping to decrease, but also we have to account into that given having to cancel our conference last spring, we've been having to pay some licensing fees that have still maintained some costs through the year without having any income. So this is a difficulty that while we would like to decrease our costs a lot more, it's still going to be difficult to try and maintain ourselves going into the next year. So we're hoping to create similar openings for students and be as flexible as possible, but that will all come through our registration process. And for those interested at this point, if you would like to remain in contact with our conference, you're welcome to fill out our contact on our webpage. And then from there, we will get back to you as soon as our registration is open.
Thank you, Rebecca. And Kevin, would you mind sharing about the trend you see across MUN conferences? What are some of the costs that we're seeing? And also what about Best Delegates conferences that they're going to be hosting this year as well?
Oh, trends. Trends is hard to speak to because I think everyone's kind of adjusting right now, and definitely I think virtual is going to be lower for most conferences because of just not having certain costs. But I think these conferences still rely on these organizations still rely on the conferences to generate income for their organizations to do MUN. So there will still be some costs. I see a lot of free random conferences. I call them random because I've never heard of them before until, so there are those that are out there too. And I'm sure a lot of conferences are also offering lower cost and free and financial aid because it's online. There's not, the costs are lower. For Best Delegate, ours are one-day conferences. So we looked at the typical one-day conference and we ended up at 25 for a one-day conference. And primarily this is for the consistency and professionalism because we actually pay our staff who are trained by us and have been doing this for months to chair, and also we pay them to write the background guides. So that's what the costs go to. And for small committees, as well as certificates that every student gets. And we're physically shipping gavels for our invitationals. So all that goes into the cost. And similar to NAIMUN, we do offer scholarships for Title I schools as well. And we've had a lot of schools that do our programs for free. By the way, I want to give a shout out to NAIMUN for their NAIMUN aid because they give out a lot of money every year and not enough schools take advantage of it. So awesome shout out, bring that up.
Thank you very much, Kevin. Quick question that we had from Kimberly in the chat about awards. How many of your conferences are still going to be offering awards this year? Can I get a show of hands from our panelists? So many of our conferences will still be offering awards. Some of them are going to be doing them where they're mailing them. Some of them are going to just be doing downloadable awards. BMUN, would you mind sharing your plan for awards this year briefly so people get a sense of what some conferences are doing?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's not entirely set in stone, but really the plan that we have the working plan that we have moving forward is that we're going to be planning on shipping gavels in person, and we'll likely send out outstanding and commendation awards via PDFs. If it ends up being feasible that we can ship those as well, then that'd be great. But that's what we're looking at right now.
Awesome, thank you. So next, I want to give each of our panelists a second to drop into the chat for everyone the name of their conference, the date that the conference is happening, if their conference still has registration open, and if so, the registration deadline. Basically, this is your chance. We've got over 100 advisors and student leaders here today. I'd love for them all to get the link to your conference and to have just a little bit more detail. So I'm going to allow each of our panelists a minute to drop that information into the chat. And in the meantime, one of the top questions that we got from so many of you are what resources are available to help my students prepare. And like Chris said, and like Alex said, a ton of conferences have resources out there, but I also want to share with all of you what Best Delegate has in store for everybody this year. So I'm briefly going to introduce and preview some of the great resources that we have already out and coming out over the next few weeks to help advisors and students. So there are a number of free Best Delegate resources out there. The Model UN conference database was just launched yesterday. We have conferences at the middle school, high school, and university level, all listed in our online database. It is as up to date as possible. We're going to continue to update update it as more conferences release information. And if you have a conference and you want it added to our database, you can reach out to us as well, and we'll be happy to add that in there. We also have a Model UN training video library, which I'll preview for all of you, some great training resource guides, and a ton of resource articles that are read by over 800,000 people a year. And we want to continue to be able to provide those resources so more and more people can do Model UN this year. So what do those resources look like? A brief preview of the conference database. Kana's going to drop the link into the chat for all of you. But on our new conference database, you'll be able to see all of the conferences that are happening at your level, middle school, high school, or university. You'll be able to filter by date and location and whether or not it is virtual or in person. So we just did a big revamp of this. We hope this resource will be really helpful for you as you select conferences for your students to attend this school year. Next, I want to share, for those of you that haven't seen it before, we have an awesome training library of videos on the Best Delegate website, and Kana will also drop the link for that for all of you as well. But especially for your new delegates or for your delegates looking to improve their skills, we have videos online, all free and easily accessible, on what is Model UN, on how to write MUN resolutions, on public speaking structure and research, and how to improve your body language and the way you sound, and more. And I definitely recommend checking these out. Some of these videos have been viewed over 100,000 times, and our team has put a lot of work into creating some great resources to help your students prepare. Next thing I want to mention is our Model UN guides. We have a ton of articles on bestdelegate.com, and one of the initiatives that we've gone through is taking the top resources and articles and making it easily accessible for students, parents, and teachers to be able to understand Model UN and prepare. We just launched a new guide this past week for parents to understand Model UN and what it is. So feel free to check that out. We'll drop that link as well. This is something that you can share with parents and students for them to understand more about MUN. We also have a guide for new delegates. We have a guide for students doing crisis to learn all the fundamentals of crisis. We have a guide for advanced delegates as well. Feel free to check that out. And coming soon, in the next week or two, we'll be launching our guide on how to run simulations online using Zoom. Here's a little preview for all of you. It has a checklist for you to be able to practice doing simulations with your students, and it walks you through step by step how to utilize Zoom and all of the features there to run conferences. I know there are other platforms that are also being used online, but feel free to check this out as a great resource to help your team get started. So those are some of the resources that we have available on bestdelegate.com. I recommend you check them out. And if you have more questions about Model UN conferences, we want to keep the conversation going with all of you and with our panelists. Please feel free to email us at mun@bestdelegate.com, or you can continue this conversation with us on our Facebook page as well. So that's just a little bit about the resources that are happening, that are available this school year. We've heard a lot of awesome information from our panelists. And now I want to actually turn it back to our panelists briefly for us to wrap up in the next 2 minutes or so. And if each of you just want to give a quick close to share how you're feeling, a quick sentence or two about Model UN this coming school year. And if you had one tip for everybody here, what would you encourage them to do after attending this event? So one tip for everybody here to get started on their MUN journey this coming school year. And let's start that off with Alex. Do you have a closing recommendation for everyone here today?
Which Alex?
Oh, you, sorry. I know we have two awesome Alexes. We'll hear from the Secretary General from NAIMUN first, and then from SUNS. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Laura Beth and all Best Delegate, for hosting this panel. It's really great to answer some of the questions that you all have. I think the biggest thing I can say is look at all of the conferences' websites and look at the committees they're offering, and do your own research. I think that's the biggest and the most enjoyable part of prepping for a Model UN conference, no matter what it ends up being, is kind of learning more about what are the topics that are being talked about. Are they current events? Are they fictional? Are they non-fictional? All of that type of stuff to really get your delegates prepared, but also get yourself as advisors prepared for kind of what each conference has in store.
Thank you very much, Alex. Alex from SUNS, would you mind sharing one final tip or thought for our group here today?
Yeah, thanks, Laura Beth. And before, of course, just to echo what Alex said, thank you, Laura Beth and Best Delegate for hosting us today. The one bit of advice is just to, if you have the means, I mean, this year to participate in Model UN, if you're coming from a delegate right now or a teacher, faculty advisor, make sure you do it. I think this year is so precarious for all extracurriculars, not just Model UN. So if you have the opportunity to provide your students with that, seize the moment, go for it.
Thank you very much, Alex. Next, Rebecca, do you have one final tip for everybody here today?
I think don't get caught up in being scared about our present situation and focus more on how positive you can make all the opportunities people are coming up with right now and making the most of that with your team and all the new connections you're able to make through our platforms today, because it's really been a surprisingly supportive and innovative time.
Awesome. Thank you, Rebecca. Chris, would you mind sharing one final tip for everybody here today?
Yeah, I'll go out on a limb a little bit, and I'll just say I think it's really valuable for everyone here to really learn about Virtual Model UN and really become very familiar with it, because I'm very convinced that, you know, this year is an anomaly, but I think that Virtual Model UN is going to be here to stay, and it's going to be a really great opportunity for folks. So the folks who can get ahead and learn it now will serve themselves very well in 3 to 5 years.
Thank you very much, Chris. John, do you have a final tip or piece of advice for everyone here today?
I was going to say, usually we have grand themes to our conference, like learning from the past, leading the future. Our theme this year was make it work.
Absolutely. I think that sentiment is true for all teachers teaching school and students attending school, and carries true across the MUN community as well. Ashwin, do you have one final tip or recommendation for people as they plan for the MUN year?
Yeah, definitely. I think like for both advisors and delegates, I think it's important to, or people just organizing conferences themselves, I think, you know, we've all kind of had to deal with, you know, what does impact look like, whether it's in committee or whether it's as a conference or as an institution. Different people will define those criteria differently. And I think training and planning really needs to be molded around those requirements. Ultimately for delegates themselves specifically, you know, I think the most prepared delegates don't necessarily have to arrive with, you know, an entire binder filled with notes and their pre-written speeches. You know, delegates that end up succeeding, and I'm sure others on the panel will definitely corroborate this, are those that really understand their topics, engage with their country positions, and are able to diplomatically come to solutions. And really, you know, whether you're an advisor, someone organizing, or a delegate, it really just comes into recognizing and understanding all the different aspects that go into a successful MUN conference and tackling those head on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashwin. And Kevin, would you mind closing us out with one final tip for all of the advisors and student leaders here today?
Yeah, I mean, my sentiment is it's happening. Like the SOCOMUN had 1,000 students. SUNS is like registered to the max with 1,000 students. Like it's happening. So it's time to, you know, it's inspiring to see that happening. And my one tip would be just like the tip I would give a brand new delegate, which is if you're scared to raise your placard, now's the time to raise your placards. If you're scared to try Virtual MUN, now's the time to try Virtual MUN. Jump in. I'm in the same boat as Chris. I believe this is going to be here to stay. There's going to be virtual MUNs in the future, even if it's just meant to help practice in the future or attend additional conferences beyond the in-person ones. So now's the time to be in the forefront of that wave and to help get your students involved and to give them this awesome opportunity this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And I'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our panelists who took time out of their schedule to be here and to answer your questions today. And thank you to all of the advisors and students who are joining us now live on this call, and for those who are viewing it after the fact. We really appreciate all the hard work that you're putting into helping to empower students through Model UN. So we are going to wrap up now. If you have any questions, please feel free to email us or to continue the conversation online. I'm going to hang out for a few more minutes as moderator, and if you have any questions for me, please feel free to drop them in the chat and I'll do my best to answer them. But with that, I want to tell everybody thank you, have a great evening, and let's do it. Let's have a great Model UN year this year and empower hundreds of thousands of students through MUN around the world. Thank you all very much and have a great evening. If you have any other questions, I'll hang out. Please feel free to drop them in the chat. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to our panelists. You guys are welcome to head out if you'd like to. I'm going to answer any last lingering questions that pop up in the chat. I see a question from Logan. Would it be possible to have a session focused on Title I schools and MUN? That's a great question and a great idea. We are always looking for more things that we can do to help the community. And I think one thing we should do to start is probably an article on that topic. We've worked with a lot of Title I schools that are interested in providing resources to MUN. So I will raise that with our team and see if we might be able to do something to help discuss how do we bring MUN to more people and make it more equitable. So thank you for that recommendation. We'll definitely keep that in mind and see what we can do for you there. Kimberly, thank you for your feedback. I'm so glad the videos have been helpful for your school as you prepare for conferences. That's awesome. Let me see what other questions we have here. Bye, thank you. Awesome. I see a lot of nice messages there from people that are excited to learn more. Thank you to all of the student leaders and advisors. If anyone else has any final questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I see a great question from Henry. How can we encourage beginners to talk during virtual conferences, especially because you've seen classes that lag? Yeah, I think burnout on online school is a real thing. And you have to make sure that your online conferences and your online simulations are really, really engaging and fun and upbeat for students. And one of the ways to do that is creating a different kind of online culture. We highly recommend starting with icebreakers and starting with activities that are going to help people break the ice and get to know one another. And also, I would encourage your chairs at conferences, and I know Best Delegates conferences are taking a more active role this year in helping to facilitate a great online learning environment to make it super fun and engaging. And Henry, we've got some of the tips on that in the Zoom guide that will be coming out in just a couple of weeks. So I'd recommend checking that out. There's some fun recommendations for icebreakers to shake it up, like having students bring back an object that represents them or an experience they've had. And we run that one at our programs, and it's really been a great way to break the ice with students as well. So a great one there. I see we have a hand raised. I think Luis raised your hand. Do you want to go ahead and unmute yourself and ask a question as well? Did you have a question for us?
Was it for Lois?
Lois, sorry. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, you know, I am interested in trying to do a Model UN started, and we just need to figure out how to go about doing this effectively. We're trying to reach more African American inner city students.
Absolutely.
To engage in the skill building that I've seen so much about, and I wanted to know how long do they stay with the program when you actually engage them? Is that, and I was very interested in the fact that you said you were going to write an article.
Happy to do so. So I think the answer is you start with 4 years and then you hope for life. I see Ryan, one of our co-founders, smiling there. We've worked with a ton of Title I schools where MUN has been a truly transformative activity and has really helped students engage in really difficult topics to discuss and create a platform for having those important conversations. So I would say Model UN is not a one-day experience. It's not just a one conference experience. It's a learning journey that happens throughout middle school, throughout high school, throughout college, and really is providing the foundation to be able to have critical and important conversations throughout life. So I would say that's a good question. How long does it last? As long as the students are open to learning and engaging all throughout a school year, and what they learn can stick with them all throughout life. But Ryan, do you want to add anything on that? I see your microphone is out, and I'm sure you're eager to share a bit more about that too.
Oh no, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we hear you.
Can
you hear me? All right.
Yeah.
Hello. Hey, Lois. Great to see you.
Hey,
again.
how you doing? Good. We're trying to set up an appointment with you.
No, I saw. You know, Laura Beth, you should tell Lois about our experience with Idea Public Schools, which is a Title I charter school network that we worked with.
Okay.
I would be happy to. So IDEA is one of many Title I schools that we've worked with. And actually, our partnership started with them back in 2014 when we had one school of Title I students attend one of our summer programs and learn Model UN. And over the last 6 years, we've built an incredible partnership with them. And they've trained hundreds of student leaders and advisors in Model UN, and now have Model UN across 50 plus schools, 15 with super active Model UN clubs, and essentially tons of students that never would have had the opportunity to travel or to do Model UN before have been empowered through MUN and have been able to find their voice, learn about their college identity, travel to conferences, meet people with different opinions, and engage in these really important dialogues. So I would say MUN is important for everyone and can be a great equalizer and a great way for students to discuss these really hard issues, being from any background.
Well, we're looking forward to engaging, so we just need to figure out how to jump in.
Definitely. And one thing we've done too is a lot of Title I schools, some of them have specialized funding that can be used for programs to learn about college or career readiness. And we've been able to partner with Title I schools and tap into some of those resources to help scale Model UN out in huge ways so that thousands of students can experience conferences and trainings through their school programs.
Good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
What I would add to that is one of the things that we're able to do, and Laura Beth and I have had to work really closely on this, is we believe that Model UN should serve the learning objective and the educational objective of the school, of the district, or even of the country. So we worked with networks, districts, but we also worked with national governments and asked them, like, well, what is the larger objective that Model UN fits into for you, whether it's promoting global citizenship or civic engagement? And how do we design a Model UN program that actually meets that need, and how to do it at scale? So that's one of the things that we do. And I know, Lois, we're going to get a meeting on the calendar.
Yes.
And we'll sit down and really talk and strategize for how to do that.
Good. Thank you so much to both of you, to all of you.
Thank you. We are so glad that all of you guys took time out of your evening to join us and to hear more about MUN.
Okay.
Does anyone else have any final questions? I see one more question from Henry. How can we attract students to come as new delegates to beginner conferences? That's a great question. How do you just break the ice and get students started? Ryan, do you want to share a little bit about that one? I know that you've taken on a ton of different roles over the years with Model UN and have served in a lot of roles in getting kids started at MUN as well.
Oh man, there's a whole range. The immediate answer that came to me was like, get them while they're young. The way that I got started in Model UN was going from middle school into high school. I got a letter in the mail from the high school MUN program inviting me to attend an event over the summer, hosted by the MUN program, where we didn't even do MUN. We were playing soccer and like playing with exchange students from Germany. But it was a great way to just be introduced to the community around our Model UN program. And that was more the hook, I think, than anything else. And I think students, at least like younger students, like whether they're in middle school or like entering high school, they're looking to find like their place, I think. And Model UN isn't that for everybody, but I think it can be that for a lot of students. And I think the key is actually at those points, like that summer entering high school or at the beginning of the school year, if there's an event, whether it's in person or today virtual, where the MUN students have a chance to talk about MUN and more importantly, to do it and have fun with them. So we use an activity called Fruits and Vegetables as our hook for getting students interested in Model UN. And that's one strategy that we recommend to schools and to clubs to deploy in order to make MUN both just fun and light and engaging, especially at the beginning of the school year, and then work with them over the rest of the semester to really build up their skills and their knowledge.
Definitely. Lower the barrier to entry and then build them up as delegates who are knowledgeable about world issues. But sometimes fun debates about things like superheroes and foods and those types of issues can be a great way to get your club started. So thank you, Henry. That was a great question. Does anyone else have any final questions before we close out our call tonight? All right, without any other questions, thank you all so much for attending. We really, truly appreciate it. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us via email at mun@bestdelegate.com or ask questions at our Facebook page as well. We'll be sending out tons of resources to student leaders and advisors throughout the year, and we're here to help you make your Model UN program successful. So thank you all so much and have a great evening.